Дякую. О, все, є. Дякую.
Can you hear us, Martin? We can hear you. Good.
Now.
Yeah. Hello.
Oh, and why Martin became the Dr. Jeffrey Nail?
I'm hiding under a pseudonym, okay?
You change your name?
No, unfortunately, I don't know how change the name there. If I know, I would change it.
I have the same problems.
Okay. You know, you're from the United States. It's very interesting country.
I use somebody else's classroom on Zoom.
Martin and Victoria is quite...
Victoria, hi.
Hi.
It's quite easy to change your name, actually. You just need to...
Kai, hi.
Hello.
Hello.
You just need to move the pointer on your picture and then click on the 3 dots. And then you have as an option, change my name.
Okay, I will do this after meeting.
Kirill, hi. Shalom. Shalom, everybody.
I see. Rename. I probably will try to do this now.
It's very easy, Vicky. Andrew's right.
Thank you very much.
He is only Kirill.
Like everything online, there are no instructions.
Simply very important. Okay. What we're looking for yet? Maybe that's all.
Sorry.
Only Andrei Rukas.
Yeah, while we're waiting for somebody else who might also connect, I would like just to pay your attention to the little red dot in the left corner of our screen, which means that the meeting will be recorded, and just to inform you that it will be made for the purposes of minutes of the meeting, and it will also be later used for it may be used for our internal purposes. Thank you.
Is Alexander Kruglov with us? Oh, I see him.
Oh,
Yes.
Alexandr Kruglov. The most important our speaker.
I can see his name, I think.
We lost him in Kharkiv.
Yeah, I mean, if necessary, I can go first, Vladislav, because I understand this time is important.
Так, ну мы что, кого-то ждем или можно начинать уже?
О, Круглов, мы тебя ждали как раз.
Так я тут все время постоянно.
Ага. Окей. Good. Я не бачу Круглова.
Ну как это нет? Я тебя вижу.
Все, бачу. Ти invisible man. Okay, Alexander. Yes, okay. We may start, I think, yes? Okay. Dear friends, I'm very glad to see you all safe and sound after this quarantine and so. I hope you well and have a good rest in this summer. Research institutes that we were established as part of the Memorial Center continue their work. In particular, the Institute of Babin Yar territory is preparing an annotated bibliography for the Babin Yar Encyclopedia. The vast majority of members of our scientific council take part in this work. With this seminar, we begin the series of scientific events that will address complex and little studied issues. Such complex issue includes about all the sites of killing of Jews in September 1941, where this shooting began, in which places they took place, how many of other places there were. Mартін Дін and Олександр Круглов will offer for you the explanation of these very complex topics. After that, we will have time to discuss reports and have a time for various questions. Mартін Kruglov begins, yes, the first. Kruglov, about the places of execution in Kyiv Jews at the end of September 1941. Александр, пожалуйста, начинайте.
Массовые расстрелы евреев в Киеве фактически начались 27 сентября 1941 года. Не 29-го, а фактически 27 сентября 1941 года. Жертвами были, во-первых, гражданские евреи, в основном мужского пола, которые были схвачены в городе и помещены в лагерь военнопленных, который занимал казармы на улице Казарменной и казармы на улице Керосинной, а также военнопленные еврейской национальности, которые были отобраны в этом лагере и также помещены в отдельное отделение этого лагеря, так называемый еврейский лагерь. Этот еврейский лагерь, это отделение, находилось в казармах на Керосинной улице. На Казарменной улице находился основной лагерь. Он занимал эти вот казармы, основной лагерь. А на Керосинной улице в казармах был устроен еврейский лагерь. Вот туда помещали отобранных евреев военнопленных, а также евреев, которые были схвачены в самом городе. Ну, гражданских евреев, в основном мужского пола. Ну, поскольку именно из этого отделения евреев вывозили на расстрел, то, как правило, в литературе часто говорится о лагере на Керосинной улице. Хотя фактически на этой Керосинной улице, сейчас эта улица, как известно, Шолуденко, улица Казарменная называется сегодня Андрющенко, улица Андрющенко. Так вот, именно вот с этого отделения на улице Шолуденко, нынешней улицы, ну, Керосинной в прошлом, и вывозили евреев на расстрел. Поэтому в литературе, как я сказал, в основном речь идет о лагере именно на Керосинной улице. Ну, об этом существуют и соответствующие документы, в частности, наверное, вам известно хорошо приказ номер 5 коменданта украинской полиции в Киеве Орлика о том, чтобы схваченных евреев в городе помещать именно в лагерь, еврейский лагерь, там так было и сказано, еврейский лагерь на Керосинной улице. Как я уже сказал, расстрелы начались 27 сентября 1941 года. Евреев из этого лагеря, точнее, ну, еврейского лагеря, точнее, отделения на Керосинной улице на машинах вывозили на место расстрела. Я в своей справке о пути движения машин с евреями на место расстрела подробно описал всю эту вот ситуацию. В общем-то, с этой справкой моей можно ознакомиться. Там я все это подробно описал, каким маршрутом евреев доставляли на место расстрела. В другой справке, которую я, в общем-то, отправил буквально день назад, тоже с ней можно, в принципе, ознакомиться, я думаю, я посвятил эту справку определению самого места расстрела вот этих вот евреев, которые вывозили с лагеря на Керосинной улице. В первой справке я подробно описал маршрут движения машин с евреями на место расстрела. Вот. Но во второй справке описал уже само это место расстрела. Этим местом расстрела, по моему убеждению, был не собственно Бабий Яр как таковой, не собственно овраг как таковой, а противотанковый ров, который находился у южной оконечности Бабьего Яра. Я в своих тезисах, кстати, поместил топографическую карту Бабьего Яра 1941 года, где, в общем-то, можно себе представить, что это за южная конечность, возле которой как раз и находился этот вот противотанковый ров. Возникает вопрос, а где именно конкретно вот этот вот противотанковый ров находился? Есть две версии, даже три версии, я бы так сказал. Имеется три версии, согласно которой, ну это версия Нахмановича, противотанковый ров находился близ южной оконечности, причем он шел параллельно этой южной оконечности Бабьего Яра. Ну, кстати, в моих тезисах я поместил соответствующую схему, там можно посмотреть, что именно, где именно этот противотанковый ров находился, согласно версии Нахмановича. Ну и вторая версия, это версия Евстафьевой, согласно которой противотанковый ров находился не параллельно южной оконечности Яра, а перпендикулярно к этой южной оконечности. Причем она называет этот противотанковый ров учебными окопами. Ну, на схеме, которая опять-таки приложена в моих тезисах, вы можете это посмотреть. Вот, что конкретно подразумевается под учебными окопами и как они были расположены по отношению к самому Бабьему Яру. И, наконец, третья версия, вот, согласно которой будто бы этот противотанковый ров фактически является, вот противотанковый ров фактически была использована южное ответвление Бабьего Яра. То есть он якобы имеет, этот ров противотанковый, не искусственное происхождение, а происхождение, то есть не естественное происхождение, а происхождение якобы искусственное. Ну, по моему мнению, это вот последняя, третья версия фактически является абсурдной, поскольку все свидетели говорят о том, что противотанковый ров был вырыт, то есть он имеет искусственное происхождение, но никак не естественное происхождение. Что касается версии Нахмановича, что будто бы противотанковый ров тянулся параллельно южной оконечности Яра, то эта версия тоже вызывает у меня сомнения, поскольку противотанковые рвы, как известно, сооружались, рылись на танкоопасных направлениях, и они перекрывали дороги, по которым могли эти танки проехать. В данном же случае, по версии Нахмановича, противотанковый ров никаких дорог не перекрывает. Он как бы защищает сам этот Бабий Яр. Однако защищать Бабий Яр фактически является полностью бессмысленным, поскольку сам Бабий Яр является естественным препятствием для танков. Поэтому такое размещение противотанкового рва параллельно южной оконечности Бабьего Яра для меня является очень сомнительным. Вот. Более, ну так скажем, по моему мнению, более удачной версией того, как именно размещался Бабий Яр, является версия Евстафьевой, то есть, что он размещался не параллельно, а перпендикулярно вот, Бабьему Яру, южной оконечности Бабьего Яра. Однако на схеме этой Евстафьевой вы можете видеть, что в этом случае противотанковый ров не перекрывает дороги, никакой дороги он не перекрывает. Ну, она называет противотанковый ров учебными окопами. Там вы на схеме можете это посмотреть. Он дороги не перекрывает. То есть он не перекрывает в основном, в первую очередь, Дорогожицкую улицу, по которой могли ехать немецкие танки, и современную улицу Елены Телеги. Поэтому я больше склоняюсь к тому, что все-таки противотанковый ров находился на пересечении вот этих двух улиц, а именно Дорогожицкой современной и современной улицы Елены Телеги. На схеме вы можете, в общем-то, определиться, что имеется в виду под этим пересечением и где оно конкретно, это пересечение, в настоящее время находится. Ну, это уже, так сказать, мое убеждение в том, что где именно конкретно, это вот первое место массовых расстрелов киевских евреев находилось. Противотанковый ров на пересечении улиц Дорогожицкой и Елены Телеги. В этом противотанковом рву евреев, которых вывозили, вот, ну, маршрут я описал в своей первой справке, как я сказал, которых вывозили из лагеря на Керосинной улице, расстреливали 27 и 28 сентября 1941 года, а затем 1, 2 и 3 октября 1941 года также. 29 и 30 сентября расстрелов не было. Почему? Потому что в эти 2 дня все основные силы немецкой охранной полиции, я имею в виду 45-й и 303-й полицейские батальоны, войск СС, я имею в виду 3-ю роду войск СС особого назначения, которое было придано оперативной группе С, а также СД, я имею в виду зондеркоманду 4А, которая сыграла главную роль в этих массовых расстрелах. Все они были задействованы, использованы на массовых расстрелах в самом Бабьем Яру, вот в эти 2 дня, 29 и 30 сентября. Поэтому и расстрелов в эти 2 дня в противотанковом рву не производилось. Ну а когда основные эти расстрелы массовые были закончены к вечеру 30 сентября 1941 года, то возобновились расстрелы тех евреев, которые содержались в лагере военнопленных на Керосинной улице, в этом вот противотанковом рву. Их опять-таки по-прежнему в эти дни вывозили туда на машинах, и там в этом противотанковом рву расстреливали. Вот что касается первого места расстрела киевских евреев в конце сентября, начале октября 1941 года. Теперь, что касается второго места, основного, главного места расстрела киевских евреев. Собственно говоря, Бабьего Яра как такового уже. Существует 2 версии маршрутов, путей, по которым евреи двигались на это вот основное место их расстрела. Опять-таки, первая версия была уже давно, в 2004 году, представлена Нахмановичем. Вторая версия была представлена, ну, ныне покойным уже Львом Дробязко. Эти 2 основные версии мы сегодня имеем налицо. Ну, я скажу еще и о Мартине Дине там чуть позже. Вот. Так вот, если говорить про эти 2 версии, то, согласно версии Нахмановича, евреев, которых гнали 29 сентября 1941 года на расстрел, то есть основную уже массу евреев, поголовно гнали евреев на этот расстрел, поскольку 29 сентября расстрелы евреев-мужчин переросли в поголовное, как известно, истребление всего еврейского населения. Так вот, по версии Нахмановича, их расстреливали в юго-восточной оконечности Яра. В принципе, это тоже на той схеме, которую я приложил к своим тезисам, можно посмотреть, что имеется в виду под юго-восточной оконечностью Яра. Согласно версии Дробязко, ныне покойного уже, евреев гнали дальше мимо южной оконечности Яра, поворачивали направо на так называемый Лукьяновский шлях. Он сегодня примерно совпадает с улицей Елены Телеги, этот Лукьяновский шлях. Ну, тогда это Лукьяновский шлях, такое было название этой улицы. Гнали мимо сырецких военных лагерей на север, мимо сырецких военных лагерей на север до песчаного карьера или стрельбища, так называемого. Поскольку до войны вот в том месте вот, оно примыкало к большому западному отрогу Бабьего Яра, было устроено стрельбище. Это было где-то в середине 30-х годов прошлого века. Это стрельбище было устроено. Вот, по мнению Дробязко, евреев гнали именно на эту вот площадку большую, открытую, бывшее стрельбище, ну или песчаный карьер, так она называлась еще. Там их заставляли раздеваться, и затем уже вот расстреливали в той части Бабьего Яра, которая примыкает к этому стрельбищу или к так называемому песчаному карьеру. Для обоснования своих версий и Нахманович, и Дробязко используют местонахождение сырецкого концлагеря. Не сырецких военных лагерей, а сырецкого концлагеря, который, ну, он назывался полностью исправительно-трудовой лагерь. Так он официально назывался, исправительно-трудовой лагерь. Так вот, они используют и ссылаются на местонахождение вот этого вот сырецкого концлагеря или исправительно-трудового лагеря. Вот, поскольку, почему они ссылаются именно на его местонахождение? Поскольку, согласно показаниям бывших заключенных этого лагеря, которые они дали уже в 1943 году, после освобождения города, трупы расстрелянных евреев сжигались в том месте Бабьего Яра, которое находилось напротив главных ворот этого лагеря. Об этом говорят все заключенные, бывшие заключенные, которые сумели уцелеть, бежать, которые трупы сжигали и которым удалось избежать дальнейшего уничтожения. Вот все они говорят о том, что вот место расстрелов было как раз напротив главных ворот этого вот советского лагеря. В связи с этим возникает вопрос, где же находился, собственно говоря, этот советский лагерь или воспитательно-трудовой лагерь. Нахманович считает, что этот лагерь находился на месте советского военного лагеря, на месте советского военного лагеря, то есть южнее современной улицы Щусевой. Дробязко считает, наоборот, что этот советский концлагерь находился севернее современной улицы Щусева. Ну, в связи с этим, естественно, возникает вопрос, а кто из них прав? Где же конкретно находился этот советский концлагерь? На этот вопрос нам позволяют дать ответ немецкая аэрофотосъемка конца сентября 1943 года. Ну, часть этой немецкой аэрофотосъемки я прилагаю к своим тезисам. Вы можете там посмотреть. Вот, что представляет собой эта вот часть немецкой аэрофотосъемки 1943 года. Так вот, на этой аэрофотосъемке отчетливо видно, где именно конкретно находился этот лагерь, где именно конкретно находились главные ворота этого лагеря. На этой фотосъемке, на этих снимках совершенно отчетливо это мы можем видеть. И, следовательно, мы можем на этом основании, используя эту аэрофотосъемку, сделать вывод, где именно конкретно находилось основное место расстрела киевских евреев. А это именно то место, в основном то место, я бы так сказал, в основном, то место, которое указал Дробязко в качестве основного места расстрела евреев Киева 29 и 30 сентября 1941 года. Мартін Дін вот, на основе анализа этой же вот немецкой аэрофотосъемки 1943 года, то есть, а также на основе анализа соответствующих снимков немецкого военного корреспондента Йоганнеса Хеля, который он сделал в самом начале октября 1941 года в Киеве, вот, приходит к выводу, что действительно, вот основным местом расстрела киевских евреев был именно этот участок Бабьего Яра, включая Большой Западный Отрог. Большой Западный Отрог и тот участок Бабьего Яра, который тянется ко второму Западному Отрогу, Малому. Ну, на топографической карте Бабьего Яра вы там можете посмотреть, что я имею в виду под Большим Западным Отрогом, вторым Малым Западным Отрогом. Так вот, как раз это вот место, Большой Западный Отрог и участок Бабьего Яра от этого отрога до второго Малого Западного Отрога, вот именно это место и является, собственно говоря, тем местом, где производились расстрелы, в основном киевских евреев, 29 и 30 сентября 1941 года. Я полностью согласен с этими выводами Мартина Дина. Он еще исследовал эту проблему в прошлом году. Вот. В частности, я также принимал участие в этих всех исследованиях. Вот. И я, в общем-то, полностью согласен с тем, что действительно можно с большой очень долей вероятности считать, что вот это место действительно является основным местом расстрела киевских евреев 29 и 30 сентября 1941 года. Я в ближайшее время подготовлю две еще справки, кроме тех двух справок, которые я уже составил и отослал, а именно справка о путях движения киевских евреев 29 сентября 1941 года к к месту их расстрела и справку о определении самого места расстрела как такового. Я в настоящее время этим занимаюсь и, повторяю, в ближайшее время, я думаю, еще эти две справки я подготовлю, где подробно обосную свою точку зрения. Относительно путей, кстати, движения евреев на это место основного их расстрела, в общем-то, как правило, говорится о том, что будто бы евреи шли одной дорогой на место этого расстрела. Об этом говорят и Нахманович, и Дробязко, кстати. Они указывают одну дорогу. Правда, повторяю, Нахманович считает, что евреев останавливали у юго-восточной оконечности Яр и там расстреливали. Но Дробязко считает, что евреев проводили дальше, мимо этой южной оконечности Яра поворачивали направо, гнали по этому вот Лукьяновскому шляху до этого стрельбища, где их раздевали, а потом гнали в Яр и там расстреливали. Фактически же, насколько я установил, на основании немецких документов в первую очередь, поскольку ни в одних свидетельских показаниях об этом не говорится, советских, я имею показаниях, не говорится. Но на основаниях немецких документов, их изучения, можно сделать вывод, что было два пути, по которому евреи шли на это основное место расстрела. А именно тот путь, который указывает Нахманович и Дробязко. Вот. И второй путь, часть евреев, примерно 1/3, где-то около 10 тысяч, довольно значительное количество. Они шли по улице Дегтяревской, пошли от Лукьяновской площади по улице Дегтяревской прямо на то место, где в то время находилась Лукьяновская товарная станция. Поскольку были уверены, что якобы их будут именно с того места немцы куда-то вывозить. Поскольку был распущен слух, как известно, что евреев будут из Киева куда-то вывозить. И вот те евреи, которые в это поверили, вот они отправились прямо по Дегтяревской улице на эту товарную Лукьяновскую станцию. Но там их ждали уже немцы, вот немецкие полицейские из 303-го полицейского батальона, которые заставили евреев сложить весь свой багаж, оставить свой багаж на этой Лукьяновской товарной станции, а потом они, а также члены зондеркоманды 4А, погнали их на это основное место расстрела, по улице Кагатной. Ну, сегодня это улица Семьи Хохловых. Погнали по улице Кагатной, потом повернули на улицу Дорогожицкую, потом опять-таки мимо южной оконечности Яра повернули направо на Лукьяновский шлях, ну и довели, так сказать, погнали вот на это стрельбище. То есть было фактически два пути, по которым евреи шли на это вот место своего расстрела. Вот то, что я, в принципе, вот, хочу вам сообщить. Ну, вкратце, конечно, поскольку я вижу, тут мое время уже вышло. Вот, я уже 20 минут использовал свои, поэтому на этом я, так сказать, закончу пока. Но это, повторяю, краткое изложение моей точки зрения. Более подробно, я повторяю, я это сделаю в соответствующих справках, две которые я уже подготовил и отправил, и сейчас на очереди будут еще две. Все, спасибо за внимание. Алло, меня слышно?
Shall I take over, Vladislav? Andrei, just quickly, you know Alexander's paper for today, and also it's similar to what he wrote before. Is there anything additional in what he just said to what he has in his paper or what he's presented before on particularly the interpretations of Drobiatsko, Nekmanovic, and perhaps myself?
Yeah, I think this might be the new one, that there is more analysis with the other sources.
Okay.
And the critics of the other sources in comparison. This might be new.
Okay, that's probably me. I'll share my screen now, and hopefully we'll have a good debate afterwards, but I'll try and do this in 20 minutes.
Okay, 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can people see this screen? Yeah.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
I hear you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll go to a slideshow, I think. So this initial image pieces together much of the information we need to understand the events. And I actually got the inspiration for much of this work in Kiev about a year ago. We had a meeting in July 2017. And on the wall there were some of these pictures, especially of this tree on the skyline. And so during our meetings last year in Kiev, I somehow got the idea that there was not just one ravine, but there were probably two ravines. And the other thing that is very important is, well, where was this photograph taken of that Karel found? And is it the same as the one that Halo was taking? And if you look here on this right-hand side, you see a dark mark on the right near this cliff here, and there's also the tree in the background there. Here you have the same dark mark and cliff and the tree over here. But if you look this way, there's no tree. It's kind of weird. So I was kind of mystified by these different images last year. And with the help of Václav Gottiemba-Malishevsky, who did a good job with me in getting some more aerial photographs from the National Archives, we started to compare the halo photographs with the aerial photography. And what we found was that many of the maps, including even this one to some extent, are a little bit misleading. So this is a very important map. It was drawn in about 2000. It has the current development overlaid over where the ravines were. But what's missing here is this sand quarry. It's not on any of the maps you see here. So already from the start, we have a problem that there are different versions. And what my research showed was that this sand quarry was quite a new event. It only emerged in the 1930s when they stopped digging sand from the north of Babin Yar and started taking it from this particular place. And then it was also, of course, filled in very quickly in the 60s when the area, or the 50s even, when the area was developed. So it's a kind of short-term phenomenon of this sand quarry, but it's very important in all the witness testimonies. So this is perhaps the most famous image of the lone tree. And in my view, this is looking up the main Babin Yar. And if anything, this might even be the edge of the sand quarry here with the strip on it. So I'm beginning to see some overlaps in these pictures, but this is definitely the right-hand or main ravine, as I call it. The other one, which is perhaps most important, the halo one, I will call the western spur. So this is, again, the main ravine, actually seen from the right-hand side, although you'd be a bit surprised, this is the view we saw before. Again, you have this tree on the skyline and the sand quarry over here. And this is the most famous halo photograph. So the aim that certainly Karel set me and the team was really to be sure we know where this image was taken from. There's a big clue here at the road in the foreground. You have a very similar, and it's definitely the same cliff here, but where's the tree? And I'll come back to this photograph later, but of course these are Soviet POWs, and this is just a couple of days or soon after the mass shooting. It looks as if they're covering over the traces, which is almost certainly what they're doing. So this is a good clue of where the shooting took place. Now the tree, I found the tree, it's hiding here. If you go back to this photo, this is a close-up, this is the cliff, and you can see the tree on the edge of the cliff here, but you don't see it because of the trees behind it. It's like the blow-up of a photograph in the famous 1960s film. If you go into a larger enlargement, you can see the missing pieces. So the tree is there, but because we're looking at a different angle than the other photographs, you don't see it against the skyline, but only against the trees in the background. So if we go back here, this is an enlargement of this spot here. So the same tree is there, but instead of looking down this way at it against the skyline, from this angle, you have trees in the background and you can't see it. So this is all confirming the road in the front, that this is actually the western spur that goes from the Sirets camp straight towards this cliff face, whereas the main ravine is somewhere over here looking up that way. It's clearer from the aerial photographs as well. So just to briefly overview what I want to cover today, Alexander, I'm sure, has done a good job of outlining the theories of Nachmanovich and Drobiazko, so I'll just look at a couple of key points. My main, of course, aim is to identify the site of the mass shooting, the main shootings on the 29th and 30th of September 1941, I'm pretty sure about that. There's the issue of the sand quarry, and the halo photographs and also witness testimonies show that there is definitely clothing piled up in the sand quarry. So what role does that play? And I will try to identify the locations for most, if not all, of the halo photographs. Some, of course, you can't give a precise location because he's just pointing the camera at the ground. but we're pretty sure those are in the sand quarry, and most of the others you have enough geographical features to get some idea where they are. There are actually 2 German sketch plans by witnesses Trill and Lars, which I found very useful to give kind of an external corroboration of what we're seeing in the halo photographs, and even describing some of what you see in the halo photographs. There are other witness testimonies which are absolutely vital, especially from the Darmstadt trial, but there were also other investigations against Police Battalion 303 and another police battalion. And just the number of testimonies means that eventually there's going to be a few testimonies that give you some clues about the locations and help you to piece together what you're seeing in the photographs and the aerial photographs. And then of course the testimonies of survivors, those are absolutely vital too. I'll look briefly at remaining questions, and then we'll see how these techniques might perhaps be applied to other Holocaust sites as a project going forward. Very briefly, Nakmenovich, as Kruglov has explained, he sees the main shootings as going on in this part of the ravine, possibly a bit further on around here. But as Kruglov also mentioned, he has the Sirets camp way too far south here. If you see, this is the long ravine there. He's seeing it as just opposite the Sirets camp, but in fact the people are emerging here and going much more towards this western spur from the Sirets camp. So insofar as the survivors who were both in the Sirets camp and then in the exhumation party were concerned, this is misleading to see the Sirets camp is only going up to here. Actually, this is where the sand quarry is, and this is where most of the excavation activity is around here, I'm pretty sure. So just to confirm that, he has the main shooting site in the lower section of the ravine, but he thought this was opposite to Sirets camp. But Drobiatska does a better job of this. He does identify the sand quarry to some extent as a key element, and he does have the prisoners in a dugout further north, and he sees these as key areas where perhaps even the clothing was located. But as far as I'm aware, Alexander may have given a slightly different version, but he doesn't really identify where the shootings took place. As you'll see from the next scheme, my inclination is it's mostly in this ravine here for a lot of good reasons. If you're in this ravine, then the sound is not going to travel towards the city very much, and the people can get there much more easily. So this is a 2000 map, supposedly showing where the shootings took place on September 29th to 30th using these X's. And there are 3 locations, 1, 2, and 3 I've marked them as. This is the western spur, the sand quarry is here. And this is where this one particular version says the shootings took place. To my mind, this is largely correct, and I'll give some of the reasons later on. People are marched up a hill out of the sand quarry into this ravine, and then there are groups of shooters on either side of the exit here. It's possible that some Jews come around this way. We'll look at that in more detail. I think this information is all completely misleading. I don't have any evidence for exhumations being conducted here. The reason people have chosen it is because of the high cliff here, and they're looking for the cliff they see in the photographs and in the witness statements, but that of course is the cliff over here. It's not this cliff here, so this is wrong. And the idea that Jews were taken through the Jewish cemetery also appears to me unfounded and without evidence. There are no witnesses describing long columns of Jews going through the Jewish cemetery. There again seem to be no exhumations conducted here. And actually during 1941, aerial photographs showed that the Jewish cemetery was overgrown with trees here. It would have been very unwise to try to bring columns of Jews through a densely overcrowded cemetery. And as I say, there are no witness testimonies. The few testimonies that mention cemeteries, it's a place they go and hide or they're watching the shootings from because there's nothing actually going on here. And so it seems to me you can exclude that. More interesting is this mark here, which is actually shown on some aerial photographs as a kind of trench. Again, there don't seem to be witness testimonies describing this being used on September the 29th to 30th, 41. The actual trench that's used in the days before the shootings Kruglov has shown is probably down here further south of the Dorogozhitska Street in this area here, which is actually an open space in 41. But this is a feature that shows on aerial photographs, and it may have been a site of shootings at other times, either in 41 or 43. But again, we don't have strong evidence, but there is definitely a trench here. So there's some basis in that, but probably not the 29th to 30th, 41. More important are these markings here. This is what Drobiatsky says is the route taken by some Jews to the sand quarry. This is the route taken by the trucks, in my opinion. There may be some trucks that went this way, but I have a different version of how most of the people arrived on foot. In this sense, Nakmanovich is right. They probably went down either this way or this way into the main ravine, but they actually marched all the way up the main ravine and out the other side to get to the sand quarry. But we'll show that in more detailed maps in a minute. So as I say, this third version, just one, the western spur is in my view, correct as the site of the mass shootings on the 29th and 30th of September 41. There are bigger question marks about other mass shootings at other times, and there's not a real huge amount of evidence. I've looked at some for the shootings from the prisoners taken from 33 Korolenko Street, and those were probably opposite to the Sirets camp in a number of different places, but it's very hard to locate those precisely from the testimonies and even sketch maps. So looking at this in more detail, we have here the Western Spur, and I think there are probably 3 or maybe even 4 separate places where Jews were shot, moving up and down as the shooting squads move along here. I'm not completely sure that it's all up against the left edge. Obviously, if they're shooting them from the side and they're falling into the ravine, as they did maybe on the evening of the first and perhaps the second days, because it's not possible to walk around on the bottom, there may be more on the left-hand side than the right-hand side. But initially, they're doing it along the bottom of the ravine, as I say, in as many as 3 or 4 different squads. And there are different access points so that one group of Jews taken to be shot doesn't necessarily have to go past another that are being shot at the same time. So there may be as many as 3 different access points, but we'll look at that. This is just to give you a better idea of the route from the city. You have Jews marching up Melnikov Street. Somewhere around here, there's a checkpoint where they have to leave their carts. They come along here to the Jewish cemetery, and this is where witnesses describe having to wait along the wall of the Jewish cemetery. Then very important is this turn left here at Kahatna Street. This is almost certainly where the majority of the Jews turn left. Some others may have marched through this area, which was used to hold Jews overnight. It's kind of an army barracks here where several of these buildings may have been used to hold Jews overnight, and then they came out here the other end. Some may have marched through here at another time. Sorry. But then this is, again, fairly clear. This is Dorogozhitska Street. We have photographs down here with, again, luggage that they're not allowed to take with them piled up along here. The registration may be down here where they're counted into groups, or maybe even back here. They're separated into groups. And then I think they march up across, maybe up the main ravine, possibly along the side, and then the main ravine to get to the sand quarry, which is here, which is where they take their clothes off. And that's very, you can see that the Sirets camp is actually much more opposite to the Western Spur than it is down here. And it's probably coming out of here that the Jews who are prisoners marched to the camp here. And very important, we found in enlargements of the sand quarry, you see images of the 2 bunkers where the exhuming prisoners are working. I think they're mostly coming over this ridge here and working here to do the exhumations in 43. And this is also where the explosions probably take place to cover over the bodies, and probably on the morning of 1st of October 1941. But that's a little bit harder from the testimonies to really determine. There's only 1 or 2 testimonies on that. So this is just to confirm again, march down Melnikov Street, left on Kahatna, and then right down Dorogozhitska Street to the end of the main ravine, probably going up the main ravine. This is the hardest part to define, as I'll explain later. And what I think Nekmanovic gets his route right until they get to the main ravine, but they actually sort of pass through the place where he says they're shot. There's no shooting going on there because they have to get to the sand quarry. Otherwise, they can't put their clothes off there. There's no way you're going to have shooting taking place between Dorogozhitska Street and the sand quarry. It's not going to work. It's not practical. Here we see the clothing in what I describe as the sand quarry. For a long time, I couldn't figure this out. I have to stress that my current interpretation went through several revisions, so I can understand other people having different interpretations and they're not necessarily getting it all right at once. I'm not saying I understand everything now, but by looking particularly at the photographs, the testimonies, and the aerial photographs and maps, the sand quarry plays a key role. And here you can even see how the clothing is kind of lined up in a curve this way, going around to the left. So I think the access to the shooting ravine is up over these steep cliffs here. It seems amazing you can get over there, but some kind of passageway or pathway was made up over this ridge. Later on, there's definitely a V-shaped notch there. Maybe the notch was even created in 41. That's not clear from the photography, or some kind of passageway. Some descriptions say there are actually 2 kind of passageways. If you look at one photograph, you might be able to climb up this ridge. It's not actually as steep as it looks. And you might be able to climb up on a sort of zigzag path or a diagonal path up here and then go that way. So it's definitely possible to ascend this ridge. People do it. Haler does it. He goes from taking photographs down here to then he's seeing the next photograph is taken from up here down into the shooting ravine. So there's definitely some kind of pathway up there on the left. They enter the Western Spur mostly from this steep pathway over the cliff. A few, according to at least 1 or 2 descriptions, especially the testimony of Lars, may descend to the right into the main ravine from the sand quarry. There's kind of a path downway into the main ravine, but my belief is that then move around straight up the main ravine to the junction with the western spur, and that's where the bottom part of the western spur is being used for shooting. It's possible there are some shootings in the main ravine at that junction, and Luss describes a pool of blood at that junction, so that can't be ruled out, but it's also possible that the blood flowed from the western spur into the main ravine, and that's why you see the pile of blood there, a pool of blood there. And that's the problem with Luce's testimony is that when you read it carefully, he says that he never actually saw around the bend. So he never looked down into the main ravine. So he can't really tell if there was shooting there or not. All he says that shooting was coming from different places. And that's because there were at least 3 or 4 shooting sites, certainly in the western spur. Here we get a much better view of it from the spatial tech 3D model seen from above. This is a 2D version, of course. But what he's done very nicely, it may not be 100% accurate, but he's shown how the clothing sort of bends around to the left as you see it in the photo from Haler. And Haler's probably standing around here looking at the cliffs in the distance. You have the steep cliff here, and this is the western spur. This is the shooting ravine. Most of the shooting is going on probably from around here up to here, and then from here up to here. This is probably roughly where they're entering the shooting ravine. Some are going left. There may be a second notch that people go right. There's even some kind of platform down here in 43 that may be helping people to get into the main ravine and then go right down here. But I'm fairly sure that there are shooting squads both to the left of this kind of notch area and to the right. We're not sure if this notch really existed in 41, but there was definitely some kind of passageway that allowed Jews to climb up this hill and then enter the western spur, which was about 10 to 12 meters deep at this point. So this quarry here is actually below the ravine here because it's actually slightly deeper, I think. So they're climbing up and then they go down back in there. It's possible that Pranicheva was taken up to this area, and then there was kind of a platform on this side and she was shot from behind or possibly from opposite here. That is plausible. And there are other witnesses that certainly describe going up some kind of slope here into here, and most are shot on the bottom of the ravine, but towards the evening on both days, I think they start shooting people along the edge, and even afterwards there are people who are shot on the edge and then sort of pushed into the ravine in the days following. So there are different possibilities. This is another view of the sand quarry, sort of close up as Haler gets closer to the sand quarry wall. You can see the massive clothing here, so it's not just a few hundred Jews, it's literally thousands of Jews who are leaving their outer clothing here before they go off to the left. As you can see the piles of clothing going here. It's possible that a few go over to the right here to the end of the main ravine from the right. That's a possibility, but the main bulk of people are going around to the left, which is also described by the German guards and some of the Jews themselves. There's of course a question where Pranicheva was sitting to describe this. If we go back to this one, there is kind of something like a mound around here. That may be where she was sitting. I wouldn't bet my life on it. There are other possible mounds here, or even very possibly on the other side of the ravine, but I think that's unlikely. Most likely she was here, but that's the sort of thing that we really can't determine from the witness testimony. There's no way that she gives a clear enough description. We can say that she definitely sat at point X, but from the route that people were taking and the fact that she could see people going off on to be taken up to be shot, she was probably somewhere around here, or possibly on the other side where she had a view of all this, because she does describe what's going on in the sand quarry. This is a quotation, and there are many of these quotations. Not all of them are quite as compelling as this one, but this is partly how I've done my work. I've literally transcribed or translated certainly scores, if not hundreds, of these German testimonies. Some people testify several times. It's hard to get the translation of the word right. Sandgrube can mean a lot of different things in German, but I would tend to call it a sand quarry rather than everything else. Of course, the word for ravine is also Mulder or Schlucht. People use different terms and describe things differently. So people can argue with my translations. I think that will happen. But if you read these types of testimonies, you'll get a clear view of what's going on. This said, it must have been in the afternoon hours. We were brought in the direction of the execution site. It was similar to a sand quarry, Sandgruber. Before Jews went into the quarry, a hold-up had occurred. We had to ensure that the Jews were sent to the quarry without delay. In the ensuing hollow, there were throngs of assembled Jews. Insofar as I was able to observe, the Jews had to undress at the end of the quarry, so around towards the left, went partly naked, partly in the underclothes, over a steep slope, so up the hill, and disappeared into the adjacent valley or ravine behind a mountain slope. So does this match up with what we're seeing in the photograph? From there, one can hear shooting. Here you see it, and this is really the only map that you can trust to some extent. It was done in the 50s and had the sand quarry fairly clearly marked. There's a slightly sloping area down here. This is the actual steep wall of the sand quarry you see at the back. My view is that most of the Jews probably came up on foot up the main ravine, probably where Melnikov Street comes across. They then get up onto the left-hand side, then enter the quarry down this steep slope here. Here is probably the mound where Pronicheva maybe was sitting. They enter the undressing area in the sand quarry here. Then some or most go off to the left through one or two entryways here. Then they go into the ravine here and here. And another group may be going down into the main ravine and then led around here to the other side. I'll look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. There's another way that people get to the sand quarry. This is by truck. There is kind of a path here, which I think gave heavy digging materials access to the sand quarry in the 1930s. It's definitely possible for vehicles, probably also trucks, to come this way. They possibly were unloaded here or here, but they were then also escorted down into the sand quarry by truck. And trucks taking the clothing away later on use the same reverse path. People describe loading clothing from the sand quarry and probably up onto this road. This is the main road. And even on Trill's map, you see this road coming here, and then it joins Dorogozhitsa Street to go past the end of the main ravine. So it's all fairly clear. Some Jews were taken by truck on the country road. Most were probably marched up the main ravine. And we have one Jew who escaped along a side branch of the ravine. That's more or less what he describes. The other testaments from the 1980s are a bit ambiguous. Maybe someone with better Russian can decide for them better, but it doesn't seem to be clear to me whether people walked along the side of Babin Yar or down Babin Yar, but they definitely turn right from Dorogozhitsa Street and go north up towards the sand quarry. This is the map of Luce, which is not good, but here you see the western spur, here you see the main ravine, this is the sand quarry. He marks two entry points into the shooting place, and this is where the pool of blood is. But even when he has two here, he has people marching this way rather than up this way. So I think most of the shooting is happening in this area here. It's not a great sketch map. He says he was standing here, but he does later on go up and examine things right from this point here. He doesn't see into this side, so he can't give us much detail of that. But it's a good sketch map. I like it quite a lot. And it's much more clearly confirmed by Trill's version. Last says we went from the undressing spot up the small hill to the edge of the ravine. The ravine was about 10 to 12 meters deep. In the ravine, so he means the western spur, were lying tens of thousands of corpses on top of each other. I can reconstruct the shooting process as follows. On the edge of the ravine stood SD men. They formed a chain down to the Jews in the clothing deposit area. The Jews from the clothing deposit area had to go past these SD men and up into the western spur. So this is from the police battalion 45 records. We'll get rid of our viruses for a moment. So this is Hala again. Now what you see here behind Hala is this is the sand quarry. You can see it right here. Unfortunately, we couldn't find these posts on the aerial photography, so that wasn't a good point, but we were able to find the lone tree here. And this is what Trill describes as the shooting ravine, which bends around to the right at the end. Now Trill talks about a bridge, but he really means this road here, which crosses the ravine. Certainly in the 30s, there was this kind of dip the other side of this road, so it cuts off the western spur a little bit. And this is describing how here you see the POWs filling in the graves. So this is again the view that Hala has down the western spur. This is the sand quarry. This is the access point, the notch. And here you see the ravine curving around to the right, so you only see part of it as the rest disappears. But this is the kind of wall you can see from down here. A little bit of this wall is visible above the level here. Finally, Trill, looking from the bridge, so where Hala is standing, the depression made a turn to the right, where behind this church, a large round depression, the sand quarry in the ground, was located. It's possible that this comprised of a former sand or gravel pit. In this pit, there were also countless people who I can safely assume were all Jews. Also in this pit were mountains of clothing of all sorts. So that's exactly where Hala has it. The execution was now starting again. The Jews standing in the pit had to take off all their clothing. They were then driven in groups of 10 or 15 to the dried up riverbed, which is what he describes as the western spur. So this is his dried up riverbed. Here's the sand quarry. They're coming up a slope into it here and then being taken in groups along here to be shot in groups on the bottom. This is his wonderful sketch map. I thought this was not too useful when I first saw it, and other people dismissed it. But here, if you have him standing on the road here, this is where he sees people being shot. This is the bend round to the right. Here's the sand quarry. Here's the road that then goes around to Dorogozhitsa Street towards an alley, which is then the alley of trees on Dorogozhitsa Street. And he describes it all here: location of the shooters, victims lying here. Riverbed. He even shows where the trucks were parked on the road. This is the riverbed here. So everything is there in Trill's sketch map. It's surprising how good it is. He even has the path of the Jews to the shooting up over this cliff into the riverbed here from the sand quarry. So I do like Trill's account very much. And here you see a better version of it, people being taken up over the notch, going left and right to the shooting places, and there are at least 3 places of shooting here in the main ravine. I think this is where also most of the exhumations take place. Here you can see clearly the bunkers where the prisoners were held. They talk about going up a slope and doing exhumations here. There are also exhumations elsewhere, but they were probably from shootings that took place at other times. So I think the main part of the main shooting is in this area here, as I've stressed several times today. We really don't need to discuss in too much more detail. Other things I discovered were the blowing up of the sides of the ravine. This is described in at least one witness testimony firsthand, in another statement, a number of other statements secondhand, and it sort of spreads around Europe, this information that the sides have been blown up to cover over the graves. So we have even people mentioning that who are interrogated by the British in prisons in England. Very strange that is. The bunkers in the sand quarry, as I showed, can be clearly seen. The photographs for the items piled up in Dobrogitska Street all match up with the descriptions we've been talking about. We even found, with actually the help of Václav Majewski-Godziemba, the location of the brick factory where some Jews fled. That's visible on the aerial photographs. So I'll give you some time for discussion. We obviously have some other topics where more research is required, such as the route from the sand quarry to the Dobrogitska Street, other mass shooting locations, the location of Dr. Thomas's dacha. We think we found that, but we can't really match up the testimonies precisely with the aerial photographs. And then the Michalevka estate, we have that marked on a map, but it would be nice to identify it more precisely. Finally, this kind of technique could especially be used with, say, the Kharkov killing or Kharkiv killing, where you have at least aerial photographs of the area and many descriptions. Solotanosha, we have a sketch map and more recent photographs, as well as witness descriptions. Zhytomyr, we have a lot about the hanging and then the subsequent killing. Serniki, I have a lot of material of my own from an investigation there by war crimes inquiries. And Mizoch, we have the famous mass shooting photographs there. Finally, here we have the same view as Hala, except slightly from the left. Here you have the ridge in the distance, the sand quarry here, and this is the so-called shooting ravine being described by a survivor. Thank you for your attention. Questions?
That's all? Yes.
That's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you very much, Alexander. Martin, have you any question to Alexander? Alexander, have you any question to Martin?
I would need Andre or someone else to explain exactly what Alexander said about my own theories, because I was unable to follow all of his. I know he mentioned Nakmanovich and Drobiatsky. I didn't mention those too much, but I can talk to Alexander later if that's necessary. But if anyone has comments from his talk about my talk, any contradictions they see, then tell me now.
Alexander.
Yeah, I didn't
Please.
hear any contradictions, but we can ask Alexander perhaps.
Andrei, maybe you are answering this question.
Меня слышно?
Александр, вопрос у Мартина. Вы согласны с его версией или есть какие-то детали, где у вас несогласие?
Я, во-первых, уже во время своего выступления сказал, что я согласен с исследованиями Мартина относительно того, что основным местом расстрела евреев 29 и 30 октября 1941 года был, во-первых, Большой Западный отрог. Это раз. И, в общем-то, Мартин нам на своих схемах, на своих снимках продемонстрировал, что действительно именно в этом Большом Западном отроге производились расстрелы. А также примыкающая к этому Большому Западному отрогу та часть, собственно говоря, Яра как такового, которая идет от Большого Западного отрога к Малому Западному отрогу на юго-запад. На схеме, топографической схеме Бабьего Яра, там, в общем-то, все это обозначено. Что такое Большой Западный отрог, что-то там Малый Западный отрог, и так далее. Почему я об этом говорю? Потому что, согласно немецким документам, расстрелы производились не в одной части Бабьего Яра, то есть не только в Большом Западном отроге, вот в чем дело, а производились одновременно в нескольких частях Бабьего Яра, а именно, повторяю, в Большом Западном отроге, а также в той части Яра, которая идет от этого отрога на юго-запад к Малому Западному отрогу. Поскольку было, как известно, сформировано, по крайней мере, 3 расстрельных команды. Расстрельная команда 45-го батальона немецкой полиции, расстрельная команда роты войск СС особого назначения и расстрельная команда, собственно, зондеркоманды 4А. Вот они расстреливали не одновременно в одном месте, а именно вот в разных местах. Поэтому местом, собственно говоря, массовых расстрелов был Большой Западный отрог, вот та часть, которую Мартин обозначил, вот крестиками этими, и прилегающее к нему, собственно говоря, основное русло Яра, которое ведет к Малому Западному отрогу на юго-запад.
Martin, in all, Alexander agree with you, and you have his text and everything okay. I have a question to Alexander about the shooting of prisoners of war in this period. You know that the command of Sandler, they killed 300 prisoners of war every day, these 10 days. Александр, вот Задлер, который убивал вместе со своими подручными советских военнопленных, где они, эти убийства, по твоему мнению, производили? В Бабьем Яру или где-то в другом месте? Советских военнопленных, вот Задлер, его команда, вот, которой мы писали, готовились.
Ганса Задлера, то он в конце сентября, примерно 25 сентября 1941 года, вместе с другими офицерами СС прибыл в Киев для смены тех офицеров СС, которые возвращались в Берлин для продолжения учебы на юридическом факультете Берлинского университета. Дело в том, что вот эти вот так называемые студенты, так скажем, в июне 1941 года были отправлены, может быть, так выразиться можно, на практику, на так называемую практику, на восток в состав Einsatzkommando, Einsatzgruppe полиции безопасности и СД, на время летних каникул. Летние каникулы закончились в сентябре 1941 года, поэтому в конце сентября 1941 года их отозвали из этих Einsatzgrupp и команд для продолжения учебы, поскольку их готовили для занятия руководящих постов в системе полиции безопасности и СД, этих студентов так называемых. А им на смену в конце сентября, примерно 25 сентября, прибыла другая группа офицеров СС. В этой группе находился и Ганс Зандер. Его показания имеются, это конец 1945 года. В этих показаниях Зандер не описывает то место, где он производил, точнее не производил, а руководил, так скажем, расстрелом евреев. Он не описывает место. То есть мы на его основании его показаний не можем сделать какой-то вывод определенный, а где же именно это место находилось. Я внимательно изучил все эти показания, они, в общем-то, доступны, в принципе, у меня они есть. И во всех этих показаниях Зандер неоднократно допрашивался в декабре 1945 года, неоднократно допрашивался. Он не описывает это место. Поэтому, в принципе, в общем-то, какой-то определенной большой ценности его показания для определения места массовых расстрелов не имеют. Он только говорит далее о том в своих показаниях, что в то время в Киеве производились и расстрелы каждый день, он говорит, военнопленных, где-то примерно 250-300 человек в день расстреливали. То есть это как раз подтверждает показания других свидетелей, которые говорили о том, что в это время в Киеве начались расстрелы евреев-военнопленных, евреев-военнопленных и гражданских евреев, мужчин. В этом смысле...
Александр, я прошу прощения, ты думаешь, это именно в этот период, в начале октября, это речь шла о евреях военнопленных или просто...
О евреях военнопленных, поскольку, в общем-то, он, конечно, там путает даты, естественно, даты он смещает в определенной степени, но на основании его, в принципе, изучения, так скажем, его показаний, детального изучения, можно прийти к выводу, что он, в общем-то, присутствовал действительно на массовых расстрелах 29 и 30 сентября, не только он, а все те другие, которые прибыли в это время в Киев, чтобы, так сказать, в общем-то, получить представление, чем им в будущем придется заниматься. Чем им в будущем придется заниматься. И кроме того, он получил также в то время, в те дни, очевидно, скорее всего, это было самое начало октября 1941 года, когда продолжились расстрелы евреев военнопленных, получил задание лично руководить несколькими расстрелами. Он называет, что он руководил 2 расстрелами. То есть расстрелом 800 евреев, это где-то, очевидно, скорее всего, 30 сентября 1941 года, и расстрелами евреев военнопленных в самом начале октября 1941 года. Вот. Но, повторяю еще раз...
Martin, we talk about now the Zadner, one SS man who killed the Jews and prisoners of war Jews in this period in Kiev. The publication of this theme will be on Исторична Правда at the beginning of the next week, and you can see.
What's his name?
Who has any other question to the speakers?
Okay.
Kai.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentations. I'm not so familiar with the details of what happened in Bабин Яр and also not with the sources. But as I understand, the Soviet Extraordinary Commission was very interested in the end of 1943 what had happened in Babin Yahr, and I'm wondering if there are not any maps or sketches or photographs or so of that place that could be helpful.
There are some good testimonies in the Soviet Extraordinary Commission material, but it does seem a bit of a mystery that for most other sites, you're right, there are detailed sketch maps, they have all sorts of forensic examinations. I suspect there may well be something in some secret archive still that we don't know about, but I'm not aware of a good sketch map. Part of the problem was the exhumations, because the Germans covered the traces before the Soviets got there to some extent. But you'd think they would actually take a witness and get them to show them and draw a sketch map. You'd think they would take that trouble. But I think because this was such a sensitive site, for some reason it doesn't seem to have happened in the way we would imagine it. But of course, I bow to the superior knowledge of my colleagues.
What else was asking?
I would just comment one thing, because Martin and Alexander are using much of the German testimony material. And Martin said in his presentation that sometimes you don't understand well, very well which kind of terminus technicus the Germans are using for pit or quarry and so on. I wouldn't use too much time for this issue, because you don't have to forget that those depositions weren't written by the persons themselves who were deposing, but either by the policeman or an assistant who would type it, and then they would later it would be shown to the interrogated person, who would just say, "Okay, seems to be right for me." So it depends. It's not his correct words actually. So you don't know what the person who made who wrote the deposition, perhaps he as well chose other words.
Yeah,
so
I can confirm that, because I used to work with German policemen, and they would definitely type up a summary of what the witness said. That's the best way to refer to it. And of course it would be shown to the witness, but Andrew's exactly right. The wording is often the police officers.
Exactly, because sometimes you might have a very, a simple man as an interrogated person, and who has a very intellectual kind of speaking in his deposition, or the opposite. So, and I think when it comes to termini, so you can be very free, I would say. There is no, I don't think those are the exact terms. So this is just what I wanted to add.
I was just trying to sort of anticipate some possible criticisms, and you really have to read a lot of these testimonies before it starts to make sense. But the ones that I've chosen are ones that really do make sense to me. There are occasionally some conflicting testimonies. A lot of the earlier ones people have used, they describe the size of the ravine in lots of different numbers. But again, you have the problem that it's being sort of refracted through time. They're mostly testimonies taken as many as 20 years after the event, and their memory of that place is obviously not going to be as good as probably a Soviet investigator who was at the actual site. But the real problem we have is this sort of destruction of the site and its transformations even just before the shooting, so that very few people knew this area in the way it was in 1941 and could navigate their way around it. The most important witnesses are definitely those who worked on the exhumations, but unfortunately those people haven't left us with good sketch maps to base things on. So we're stuck with these fairly lousy German ones, but they're certainly better than nothing.
Anybody have any question yet? We have no time, and I would like to say that we revive the scientific council working now. It's a very good beginning. I would like to thank very much for all the participants, and maybe through 2 weeks, maybe in another month, maybe it is September, at the end of September, we announce another seminar of our scientific council, such interesting theme. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Can I ask for people to send any comments or questions, obviously by email to myself and to Alexander and also to Vladislav, because we need to, first of all, try and get these findings to a more public audience, but we want, of course, to have your comments before we take it public. That's really the aim of this meeting today.
I think this seminar will be recorded and will be available, and we publish your papers later, both materials for this, yes, in our material to the encyclopedia of Babin Yar also. Thank you very much, friends, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Ніхто не хоче виходити з конференції. Всім так цікаво. Okay.